Kumanjeka. Welcome to the first MV lecture of 2021. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that our museums stand on the unceded lands of the Boonwurrung and the Woiwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and that we are guests on country, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also, as always, a really warm welcome and shout out to any ULENG reference group members who are with us tonight. I can't see any of you, but I can see the numbers are building and people are joining us as I speak. So my name is Beck Carland. I'm the Senior Curator of the History of Collections in Society and Technology at the Museum. And along with my fellow curator, Kate Phillips, from the Sciences team, we produce and deliver the MV Lectures program. MV Lectures showcases our collections, our people, and our extended network of experts. This first series of 2021 will run over the next 3 months. We've called it FIRE, Past, Present, Future. And we believe it will present the rich tapestry of knowledge within Museums Victoria's networks for understanding the complex experience of bushfire in southeastern Australia. You will meet community educators, youth leaders, historians, traditional owners, fire ecologists and scientists as we present strategies for living with fire in a time of catastrophic climate change. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Zoom webinar format, it's quite different to a normal Zoom meeting. So rest assured, I can't see you, you're safe at home. However, this is interactive. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If you hover your cursor over the screen, it should pop up. And I encourage you to ask questions via that button throughout the session. And as we get to the end, I will facilitate a question and answer session with our speakers. Now, before I invite our speakers to join us, I just want to set the scene a little. Bushfire has been a characteristic of this continent for millions of years. It's been a feature of human experience on this land for more than 60,000 years. Museum collections and exhibitions play a significant role in representing bushfire to Australians and to others. In 2009, I was truly privileged to be one of the curators shaping the Victorian Bushfire collection alongside Lisa Dale Hallett, who has now retired from the museum, and my colleague, Dr. Peg Fraser, who is joining us tonight. At the end of that contemporary collecting project, Peg, an oral historian and fellow curator, just wasn't quite ready to step away. So she started a PhD continuing the work. The resulting award-winning book, Black Saturday, Not the End of the Story, explored the aftermath of the 2009 fires and its effect on people in the tiny settlement of Strathewen. Her most recent work was included in Disasters in Australia and New Zealand, a collection that Tom Griffiths has called the best new scholarship in the field. Peg now lives in the bushfire-prone Adelaide Hills and is a volunteer with Red Cross Emergency Services. She also continues her work with us at the museum as an associate curator, bringing all of that experience to the Victorian Bushfire collection. And I'd like to invite her now to join me on screen. Are you there, Peg?
Hello, Beck.
Hi.
It is so good to be working with you again. I am really looking forward to this evening. So I start by acknowledging the Piramanc people, the traditional owners of the land from which I'm speaking, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. It is a beautiful autumn evening here in the Adelaide Hills, but I want us to go back to February 7th, 2009. It was the hottest day on record at the time and a day that became known as Black Saturday. Now, the fires of that day were not the biggest we've ever had. There were bigger fires both before and after 2009. And of course, They were eclipsed by the Black Summer fires of 2019-20, but they were the most fatal bushfires since European settlement. There's a number I keep going back to, which was offered by Kevin Tolhurst, who's a fire scientist who testified to the Royal Commission. And he estimated that on the afternoon of Black Saturday, the fires emitted an amount of energy equivalent to 1,500 of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima.
Yeah.
171 people lost their lives, more than 2,000 homes destroyed, 88 communities affected, and as in 2019-20, untold millions of wildlife killed. Now, as you know, Beck, within weeks of Black Saturday, our colleague Lisa Dale Hallett established the Victorian Bushfires Collection. And she spent the rest of the year traveling to all the fire-affected regions, interviewing survivors and collecting an extraordinary range of objects, from a box of ash that used to be someone's tax files, to puddles of alloy that had melted in the heat of the fire, to a 7-meter-tall brick chimney that was reassembled brick by brick in the forest gallery at the museum to provide a place of quiet reflection. It was a mammoth task, and even now I look back and I'm amazed at all the work she did, and she has earned my undying respect for that. So Beck is showing us some of the images. There's the chimney on screen right now. Beck and I joined Lisa at the beginning of 2010, and Lisa continued her statewide sampling. And Beck worked with natural history and environmental issues and establishing links with our existing collections all the way back into deep time. I wanted to look deeply at one place and how people who went through the same event in the same place on the same day had such differing experiences and outcomes. That place turned out to be Strathewen, tiny settlement on the northeast fringe of Melbourne that was particularly badly hit. And I started working with people in Strathewen, 2 of whom we're going to meet very soon. But although this session is called Bushfire Past, I'm going to change it up a bit. Because as a historian, I think one of the most important questions we can ask is, how did we get here? How's the past helped to shape who we are today? And what can that tell us about where we might be going? So tonight, we're starting in the past, but we're really going to be talking about the present and the future.
I'm so excited for this session, Peg, and all the work that you've done since the project we worked on is extraordinary. And to get that started, I'd love to invite now Jane Hayward, who has been the teaching principal at Strathewen Primary School for 14 years and led the rebuilding of that school and the community really following Black Saturday. She has been widely acknowledged for that work, receiving the National Excellence in Teaching Award in 2010, was made a member of the Order of Australia in 2012, and received the Public Service Medal in 2019. The work to rebuild the school is documented in our Victorian Bushfires collection at the museum, but tonight Jane will share how her team at Strathewen Primary have developed world-first programs in bushfire education, from evacuation plans to environmental experiments to advanced fire mapping with their students, taking lead roles. We're also joined tonight by Scarlett Harrison. I'm so excited that Scarlett could be with us tonight. She's a graduate at Strathewen Primary School and Jane's program. She's now in Year 8 and she is passionate about the importance of bushfire education and continues to be an ambassador and advocate for Strathewen Primary. So I will invite both of you to turn your cameras on and join us. Thank you. Hi, Jane.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
So great to have you all. Now I'm going to leave you to begin this wonderful conversation and I will be back for the Q&A. Over to you, Peg.
Thank you, Beck. Hello, Jane and Scarlett. So good to talk to you. Now, Jane, I think we first met 12 years ago
I think it would be about 12 years ago, Peg, yes.
Yeah. And Scarlett, we first met, I think, 2 years ago at the launch of my book, and you stood up and gave this wonderful talk about Strathewen and Strathewen Primary. Now, if anybody in our audience is looking at these two and thinking, maybe I've seen them before, you might have seen both Jane and Scarlett in the final episode of Big Weather on ABC, talking about their bushfire programs. But when I first started in Strathewen, a number of people said to me, you got to talk to Jane and you got to get the hard hat. And I think Beck is going to bring a picture up on screen of the hard hat because it is now in our collection. Beck, can we get a picture up? And because so many people, okay, so many people had said how important it was, and to document the rebuilding of the school, that I realized that it was much more important than just replacing a building or a service. And even though I'm usually the storyteller, Jane, this is your story. So please share it with us.
Well, there's my hat. just before we start, on behalf of Scarlett and I, and well, everyone here in Strathewen, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of the land we're on here tonight, and just recognise their long history and their spiritual connection to the country that we're on, and express our gratitude for the care that they've shown to this land for thousands of years, and acknowledge and pay respects to the elders of the past and the present and those emerging. That's my hard hat that was worn to many, many site meetings here as we prepared to rebuild our school, fortnightly site meetings, and it was actually made and decorated by a student. So it's a bit of a special piece of equipment, I guess. It's seen some interesting times.
Yeah. And Jane, tell us about what happened on Black Saturday itself.
So we had here in Strathewen, as with much of Victoria, we had experienced a long drought, and we'd had a really hot first week of school in 2009, just 1 week back in our classrooms. And on the Saturday at the end of that first week, the fires came through our little valley, and it was quite an unusual firestorm. It took a lot of people. It wasn't a bushfire in the way we had previously thought about bushfire. In our preparation and our previous fire plan, we had a sprinkler system on the roof, and we had our buckets and our mops to put out embers once the fire front had passed and things. And I think Black Saturday changed for us the way that we viewed bushfire. The intensity and the firestorm that hit was so severe. So for us, we lost our little school on that day. The only thing that survived was our mud brick cubby up on the hill, and much of the local farmland, local homes, local work experience, opportunities and things really changed for everybody. So much was destroyed, our bush, our wildlife, and of course we lost many, many people on that day.
And now you know that I always get choked up when you tell me about what happened in the immediate aftermath.
So we were all in constant contact whenever messages would come through on that Saturday. And Sunday, a few of us met and figured out a plan of how we'd deal with Monday, knowing that we didn't have a school. And interestingly, my phone ran hot with people saying, where are we going on Monday? We haven't got a school. Where do we go Monday morning? So if I hadn't realised before that time just how important the school was as a centre of our community, that Sunday certainly showed that. So we met just outside the fire zone, I guess, at the Arthurs Creek Hall on the Monday, with members of the education department, and we got as many of our school families together as possible. so that we could look after one another and catch up and talk. And our then regional director from the education department made the announcement that we would be rebuilding and we would have a school again. And plans were put into place. An offer was made of some spare portables in a school about 20 kilometres away, where we could be together and operate ourselves as a little independent school on someone else's property. And we took that up. We cleaned and scrubbed and set up and prepared on the Tuesday, and we opened on the Wednesday morning with our children coming from all directions because so many people were displaced and sleeping on Nana's floor or staying wherever they possibly could. And we opened on the Wednesday morning.
And it was more than just a school, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. It's really hard to look back and think, you know, people didn't have a house to clean or a place to be or a garden to be in or anything. Work was interrupted. Life was just turned upside down. So school was somewhere where people could sit, catch up, have a cuppa. At that point in time, most of us were forgetting to eat and drink unless something was popped into your hand. So we had a parent space. We brought some of the agencies on board that could support our families. And so a lot of parents didn't want to be away from their children and children didn't want to be away from their parents. So we ran our little school and we had a staff and parents room as a spare portable as well.
Yeah, I know I've talked to many people who said it meant an awful lot to them to be able to have a place, to have some routine in their lives again.
Well, that was what our children came back wanting. They wanted school uniform. They wanted their reading diary for home reading. They wanted their spelling list for a test each week. And Diane's my other full-time teacher here, and we've worked together for a long time now. And we often laughed about all of those things that our kids detested were what they looked for. They wanted something normal. So as much as they needed to be back with us, I think we needed to be back with them too. We needed to have a little bit of normality in our lives too, because all of my staff were impacted in some way. There was so much loss, and for us being back at school was really important too.
Yeah. And while all of this is going on, as you said, from the beginning you were planning to rebuild. And so
I think it was March, Peg. I think by March we had formed a rebuilding committee. And I laugh because on that committee we had a project manager from commercial constructions, we had a draftsman, an architect, even a pastor. So we had quite a collection of people, and we started working on what we would be looking at to rebuild because there was just nothing here. So the work began. And
you opened in, was it November?
October 2010.
Yeah. And that's a photo of it behind you, isn't it?
It's our school. Very different to our little old schoolhouse, I must say.
So you went from a one-room wooden schoolhouse built in 1917
and with our portables, we had a Mod 5 double building and a single building and the old schoolhouse and an outside toilet block, to having quite a state-of-the-art teaching space. And so it was a bit of a shock to the system. We were all one thing that, we all had a say in what we wanted as we were looking to rebuild. We knew that we wanted display space. We wanted light, airy, bright teaching spaces and things. But it was really hard to get used to the thought of something new and something that didn't feel like us. So we had to make it a home again.
And I think you've done a beautiful job of it. And while you have a new school, you also developed a lot of new programs about living in a bushfire zone. And I know many of these have won national awards, but they're really world firsts, aren't they? Bushfire education programs for and by children. And I think this is a really good moment to bring Scarlett in, because Scarlett's been very active in these bushfire education programs. And Scarlett, we'd love to hear about some of the projects you've been involved in.
So Some of the projects I've been involved in were making claymation films as stop motion animation claymation characters. And we made films, we made some ads to share and project our knowledge to the community and wider areas. So basically in the films, we explained what to do if a bushfire came through, how to prepare, and like how much it means to prepare. Like if you think you know about bushfire, you don't unless you've like actually fully experienced it. And we made some ads, like 30-second ads about how stuff happens and like how to learn, how to prepare, know what to do.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody, and I'm sure many people will be interested in seeing those, I think we're going to put the link to the program's Facebook up so that people can check it out and see. There we go. So these are wonderful projects. I'm really fascinated by the bushfire risk assessments you've been doing. Please tell me more about that.
Well, basically, we have like a bunch of like tools that we use to gather information about what like the moisture content is in the leaves and in the air. So our tools are the whirling hygrometer. We like use that to measure the air temperature and humidity, which we use the inclinometer. I don't know how to say it. Inclinometer, which measures slope.
Mm-hmm.
We use the fine tools moisture meter, which we grind up leaves to measure the moisture content. All that information gets put into the MacArthur wheel or the forest fire danger meter. And that's how you predict the fire danger rating for the day.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that goes into predicting the fire danger rating and protecting everyone.
And you were doing this for Strathewen, right?
Yes.
Did you ever disagree with the official bushfire risk?
Sometimes, yes.
Uh-huh.
Like we'll gather our own data and be like, this is the real, this is the real meter for today, and this is like what we need to do and stuff.
And were you part of the group who went to the conference, the Australasian Emergency Management Conference, to present what you were doing?
The AFAC conference?
Yeah.
Yes, we were the first group to present there, like ever. And it was very exhilarating, also very nerve-wracking at the time.
But what was their response?
Their response was like, they loved having us. And they were like, so like empowered by like what we talked about.
Oh, that's terrific. And I think you've been doing other things as well, Jane, perhaps since Scarlett has graduated and gone on to high school. The fire mapping just leaves me speechless. Tell me.
So you're talking about the simulation table?
Yeah.
So look, all of this only happens because we've got such wonderful support and commitment from our local CFA members and wider CFA as well. So thanks to Liesl, who is a local brigade volunteer who is the brains trust behind getting this started, she was able to get the chance to have the sim table come out to the school for a workshop with the children. And it was the most amazing piece of equipment where the children could actually simulate using, I think it was walnut husk, the valley of Strathewen, and then enter in data, using technology, enter in data according to, days since rain, humidity, and, the weather forecast, all sorts of things to anticipate and then show how a fire would behave if one started in our valley with certain, weather conditions and things happening. So the children were actually able to watch simulated in time exactly how a fire would behave, which was just mind-blowing. The adults were as impressed as our children. It was incredible learning for our kids.
That's just extraordinary.
Yeah, we've had some amazing opportunities and incredible support from the experts, which has opened so many doors and opportunities of learning for our children.
Have you been able to take the program beyond the school?
Well, actually, last year was going to be the year where our children took the chance to go and take their program and present it in some other small schools in bushfire at-risk areas. And of course, 2020 saw us suspend all action, and we're looking forward to getting going a bit this year. But the students have worked on making commercials, little grabs of learning that they can share with the wider community. And actually, every project that they've worked on with our brigade and our community and our experts has been about sharing knowledge and educating the wider community. What can you do on a day of total fire ban? The kids came up with the idea, it's all very well to have a total fire ban day, but what does that mean? People do the wrong thing, we can teach them. So they would take things and Lisa and I would sort of, okay, that sounds good, and we'd go with things from there. Yes, it's been quite an amazing program over the years.
And we've been talking about what's in the program and how you've done it, but I think it's really important to talk about why you're doing this. And Jane, you and I have talked about this before, and I think a lot of people might find it confronting to see children working on bushfire risk. And I'm thinking of Scott Morrison's comments about the school climate strikes. And this was 18 months ago, and how long ago that seems now, so much has happened.
But absolutely, yeah.
And he was asked about Greta Thunberg, and he said, and I'm quoting from the Sydney Morning Herald here, he said, I want children growing up in Australia that feel positive about their future. So I think we've got to caution against raising the anxieties of our children in our country. And I'm not bringing that up because I want to have a crack at the Prime Minister, but I think a lot of people would share that concern. We want to think of children as being carefree, not having to think about personal safety or environmental risks or climate change.
Absolutely. I think it's a lovely thought. But the reality for us and for many children with the way Australia and around the world we deal with disaster, our children learnt very, very quickly in a weekend, in a day, that it was not always possible to remain safe. They learnt about the impact of bushfire very, very suddenly. And following that, we had some very, very difficult years where learning was affected, well-being was affected within our student group. It was hard. Our every aspect of our school day was affected here. And for quite some time after 2009, we had to handle any thought of bushfire education or fire drills or anything like that really carefully. There's no way we could have had the red CFA truck pull into the car park and have fun with the hoses or anything. Lights and sirens, forget it. Those things were out of the question. And we did lots of well-being work and things, but we still had a lot of issues with anxiety around storm clouds, the smell of smoke, summer, heightened anxiety. Our parent group, our children, everybody, we'd all been impacted. So when Lisa O'Brien and Sue Apted from our local brigade offered to come in and do some work with our students around understanding the fire danger rating system. So they came in, did some workshops, all went beautifully. Lisa came back to me afterwards and said, I've got this idea. our brigade, we think we could work with the school. What do you think? There's this great program that Jamie McKenzie's working on down with the kids at Anglesey Primary School down on the coast. Do you think we could? And I didn't know Liesl at that time, but it sounded like something we could maybe have a play with. And we did. And thankfully, we've got an amazing lot of people in our local community and amazing volunteers who've been prepared to really invest in something for the younger generation. And my aim from the get-go really was all about teaching our kids how and what it involved living in an area of high bushfire risk, and how we could get them to learn to love where they lived and trust and feel safe again in this beautiful place. And that was what we went for. And our program, Liesl and I would meet, and well, we've done this at the start of every year. We have a summer meeting, toss around ideas. The kids come along to start the school year. They throw their ideas around and run with things, and we then set about making them happen, and not making them happy. We always try and do that, but making their ideas come to life. And yes, so that's been our focus over the last few years, as it will be again this year.
And I think it's interesting that part of this learning to love where you live included field trips to bushfire affected areas. Scarlett, do you want to tell us about the field trip you did to the top of Mount Sugarloaf?
Yeah, so pretty much at the start of every year, Jamie McKenzie takes us to the top of Mount Sugarloaf in the fire trucks. And we go up there, we test all the instruments. He teaches us how to use the instruments. And he just basically tells a story about what happened. And he tells us what wildlife is returning. And he tells us a lot of stories about his experiences.
So, and we work with the local park ranger, in the national parks, which are right on our doorstep. And so it's Jamie and our local brigade, Strathew and Arthurs Creek Brigade, and lots of other local brigades bring their trucks along, and volunteers give up their time, and off we go. And it's a day of learning. There's mapping workshops, there's using all sorts of equipment, exploring the bush, looking at fuel load in the bush, looking at bark types and how they travel and how they're impacted by fire.
I think this approach of educating children is a really useful model for, in meeting all kinds of challenges, like environmental or otherwise, because we can't predict what's going to happen to us in the future. But it sounds like the skills that your kids are learning can be transferred to other challenges. I mean, Scarlett, are there ways in which the program's helped you be beyond bushfire risk?
Yeah, in some ways it has helped me, because knowing general knowledge about nature and the bush and how it warns off if anything is going to happen, not just bushfires, any natural disasters or anything's going to happen, you learn, and then the knowledge sticks with you through your life, and then you can pass that knowledge on to your friends, your family, anyone you know, and then they'll keep passing it on, so that everyone's not afraid of what might happen and not afraid of the unknown, and instead prepared about what could happen, and prepared, they're full of knowledge, they know, they're not afraid.
That's really good to hear.
Knowledge is just empowering for our children, Peg. And, I think I've had a few people say, maybe the children are focusing too much on disaster risk.
Yep.
I think we're focusing on disaster resilience and empowering young people. And I think for a long, long time, we assumed that managing bushfire risk and similar risks was an adult issue, and that children didn't really have a part to play. And I can say 100% that we've kind of proven that wrong well and truly.
And you've been able to take this model beyond children, haven't you?
Well, it's being used. Our model is being used elsewhere. Our project model of this was developed really by our local brigade as something that suited our need. And I think that's a really important point to make, that any community embarking on a bushfire education program really has to tailor it according to what's needed locally. So our program has been presented far and wide by Dr. Bryony Towers, who we've done a lot of work with, and our model has been being used elsewhere in other communities affected by other disaster. And I think it's been it's proof that what we're doing has been beneficial to us, but has also had an impact outside this little valley, because we're tucked away out here where there's, as you and I laughed, there isn't a shop, there isn't a pub. We've got a school, a hall, and a sports pavilion.
Yep.
So to think that something that we're doing here in a tiny little school is going far and wide and being used and benefiting other people is wonderful.
And it is regarded as best practice.
Yes, we didn't know that. We just went with what seemed to be really working, and the feedback from our children. They undertook an evaluation of their project a couple of years ago with Dr. Bryony, and it was interesting. They kept saying, well, we know it works, but I guess we have to prove it. So they did a whole lot of surveying research that they then developed and put into a presentation, which was delivered at the AFAC conference in Melbourne, because they realised, yes, this has had an impact on well-being. Children and parents reported on improved sleeping behaviours. The information that the kids were working on here was going home and being shared around the dinner table. Our children present their project and their year of learning each year at a community event that we invite widely to, and our children were presenting to an audience of often experts in the emergency management field, and they were sharing their knowledge to local community members and experts alike. So there's this whole, it's amazing when children share and have something to say, people tune in.
That's great. Our other lectures in this 3-part series, one is coming from a scientific perspective and another one from the Indigenous perspective. And I can see a clear connection to the science stuff, talking about doing bushfire risk assessments and the simulation. And I am so impressed with what you've been doing. But we've also talked about a connection to the Indigenous idea of care for country. And do you want to elaborate on that again a bit?
Did you want me to talk about that or Scarlett?
I think both of you. I think we could both talk.
Well, I'm very happy to start. We had part of the project in I think it was 2019. Students looked at bushfire history, the history of the land that we're on here, and major bushfire events that have been in the area and in the state of Victoria. So they did a whole lot of research, and that formed the basis of their work that year. We were fortunate to work with a local Wurundjeri elder in Ian Hunter, and for our children to learn about land management and what things were like here prior to white settlement was really important. And Scarlett can go on. Scarlett was one of our students in that year of learning, so I'm going to hand over to Scarlett.
Yeah, we had a visitor, Wurundjeri elder Ian Hunter, come to the school and share stories about his elders and about all sorts of things. He told us about Shooty Woody, the fire spirit, Bunjil, the eagle, the crow, and everything. He was really amazing. He talked about the land as if it was like just amazing. He talked about the land as if it was his friend, his colleague, his like family, and he just like loved it because the Indigenous elders, they weren't like afraid of fire. They worked with fire and with the land and with the animals and everything.
I think we're coming to the end of our time, and we do want to leave lots of time for questions and answers. But I guess finally, what are we going to do about the future? So we learned a lot about Black Saturday, or a lot from Black Saturday, and I think we've got new lessons to learn from the Black Summer. But I worry a lot about the future, and I'm not alone. I mean, we've got new terms to describe this week: eco-anxiety, eco-grief, Glenn Albrecht's term solastalgia, and I heard a new one last month, gen dread. And this is a big question, I know, but when you look into the future, what do you see? Jane, do you want to start us?
What do I see? I have great faith. I'm working with young people every day here. I'm the teaching principal, so I'm still in a classroom. And I have great faith in our future with our young people. I think the more we can empower them to seek information, to learn, to be informed and make a difference, I think they're chomping at the bit. They're ready to go. And, our students coming through this program particularly have learned that they have a voice, they can be taken seriously, they are part of planning for the future, they understand the planet a lot better, or they understand their local environment certainly a lot better than many of their elders, that's for sure, in our current climate. Look, I think they're very interested and passionate about how we're treating the planet. They want the world to be a better place, and I have great faith.
Scarlett, you're going to have the longest future of all of us.
Well, when I look into the future, I see people that are not afraid because they know about everything they need to. They know about bushfire, they know how to prevent it, they know how to predict it by listening to nature, because nature gives us warnings all the time, but we just don't listen. I also see just people just being happy and not worrying, not being anxious, not being distressed about the unknown. When they know, they feel protected and they feel safe.
Gosh, that's a very powerful statement. Thank you so much. And thank you to both of you. And I'm just going to finally go back to Beck's opening comments, that although we're talking primarily about schools and children, that this is important stuff for all of us, because with the increasing pace of climate change, we're all entering a new world, and we're all going to have to learn a new way of living. So in that sense, we're all going back to school.